The Hobbit, Homo Floresiensis. This is a story that is not made up by Hollywood. No, quite the opposite. This is, in fact, a story that concerns each and every one of us. Because what this story is about is a mystery now that surpasses many of the thoughts of the origins of who the human race is. Whether you want to think of the human race in terms of modern man, fine. Or if you think of the human race as a species, then questions abound. And they now abound even more. So we're going to talk about the Hobbit. We're going to talk about who and what this new species is about. And as we have seen already, there is something that, well, demands an answer as to how this fits in to the whole progression of mankind. I mean, do we take the theory of religious doctrines that teach a much different story than what the fossil record is showing? So when we talk about the Hobbits, and we're going to call these exactly what they are the Flores Man, because you're going to see where, in fact, they flourished. The reason why the Hobbit is that they stand about 3.5 feet tall. But now here is the thing. Their brains were every bit, for their size, equal to ours. That's something to think about. So, what and why make a video on the Flores Man? Well, I'm going to show you why. So, this just came out April 21st. The origins of the Indonesian hobbits finally revealed. And what is now, well, it's going to be very hard to dispute the fact that what the findings are showing are quite remarkable. And that is this, folks. This creature is not related to us. Not even close. So, what do we have here? We have a mystery. And as you can see, this is notable because of what the implications. And this is what we have to begin to understand. So, when we start talking about the Flores Man, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a species that were in what's called Indonesia and in a very specific area. Now, this is very interesting. So, when they began to find the first evidences of what were thought were pygmies, and then mistaken for a branch of chimpanzee or some sort of extinct ape, in the Flores Island in Indonesia, what they found were not just 1 or 2 skeletons. No, they found a whole culture, a whole new race. And as you can see, where Homo erectus comes in, and by the way, we're further down here, we're the Homo sapiens. it begins to demand what's going on. Now, there has been a lot of controversy where this species is concerned. Many, for the longest time in anthropology and archaeology, they butted heads because what they were seeing was not acceptable in many, areas, particularly where religion in the church is concerned. This blows religion right out of the water because it basically says the story is wrong. So they began to find more and more evidence of a creature that was the only thing you could say would be the Hobbit. Now, this is not a Hobbit. This is not the movies. This is a Hobbit. A complete different species with what appears to be races within the species. Now, this begins to open up a whole lot of questions. How could this be possible? How could there be a species separate from Homo sapiens? You and I. Yeah. And when you begin to look at this, that the new discoveries that came as a result of the Australian National University, what they found, that the race were most likely a different species altogether. Now, researchers think that they were related to a sister species of Homo habilis, one of the earliest known ancestors of modern mankind, which lived in Africa 1.75 million years ago. Let that soak in. Now meet Dr. Debbie Argue from the ANU School of Archaeology and Anthropology. Her findings is what literally is going to be, no doubt, hotly debated, particularly, I would imagine, in religious circles, because this changes the foundation of what once was merely a hypothesis, then a theory, and then fossil record. Now, what is going to do for this is going to help, the results should help solve the debate that has been hotly contested ever since Homo floresiensis was discovered. The analysts showed that on the family tree, we know where the hobbits, and let's just call them hobbits, was likely a sister of the species of Homo habilis. Now, it's possible that the hobbits evolved in Africa and migrated, or the common ancestor moved from Africa, then evolved into the hobbit race somewhere. Now, again, the problem with that is that if you take that course, you have a lot of ambiguity to deal with. So what these findings are going to be able to help support is the fact that this is, in fact, a separate and new identifiable species. Now, here's where they lived. This is one of the most exciting archaeological digs taking place right there in Indonesia. And what they're finding is remarkable. This species of hominids were extremely intelligent, very resourceful, and ahead in many ways on where they should have been in the timeline. Very intelligent. They appeared to have a reverence for death and for the dead, much like we do today. And you can see what a protected environment that this would be. Now, here's a pile of hobbit poo. It's true. Indoor toilet. Here are pictures that we're beginning to see now from the 2003 excavation. These are buried bones through millennia of sediment. Extremely advanced, using and making out of stone utensils. They're not sure if this is carvings or if in fact it could be a written language or a form of communication. What we do know, again, they were extremely intelligent. Now, when you begin to look at from the Hobbit to the Homo erectus to the Homo sapiens, size was obviously one of the first indicators. Now, you can call this, I don't know, the only thing you can say that this is an evolving species, or somehow or another, when one species dies out, somehow another emerges. Now, that still is a mystery. How does that take place? But yet, it would appear that the fossil record would indicate that that's exactly what's happening. And now you can actually see the difference all the way from the brain to when they lived. So we can identify the Hobbit's roots and their contribution to our species is immense. Done detailed study of their bones, cranial. Again, here's the good doctor argue. I mean, what a fascinating field to study. That when you begin to think, you're piecing the record of humanity. That is just amazing. This was a real person at one time. Actually lived. By all indications, thought, spoke. What was their world like? They lived. You can almost look into the eyes and see the person's soul. I wonder what her thoughts were. So when we begin to look at the family tree, because either there has to be a family tree, or again, then it opens up a whole new question as to how did it collapse and then start again? I mean, you have to really begin to ask yourself that. Now, this kind of shows you the size difference. And it shows you the many different species. And that's all you can say. They say that Homo floresiensis was, in fact, more intelligent than the future evolution of the hominids. And, you know, it's just hard to accept sometimes that the history that all of us search for, depends on what you accept as your history, but no doubt a history no less of what we are today and what was here before us. And then think for yourself what's going to be yet. They were intelligent, societal, hunter-gatherers. And what I found interesting in this, and just the research that I've done, I have found this, I've been on this for years in constructing what is the real history, what really happened here. That the females were as equal to the males. Now these small people, and they were people, had to live in a world unlike anything any of us can imagine. I mean, when you think about it, the average height is 3.5 feet, a meter. It doesn't take something to be too much bigger than yourself, right? But here you go. And you can see how the different, I don't know, what do you want to call them? Versions? Models? Species? How they were here. And by all indications, not too much different than us. And you have to begin to take it in the fact, when you talk about the Homo sapiens, we come off of the family tree of Homo erectus. Now, Homo erectus, it is thought, came off of, split off to form Homo Floresiensis. And I messed that up, so we'll just say the Hobbit. But indications are showing now that this is not true. That line is not connected. These are the actual bones. Now, what makes this unique is this. We'll call the Hobbits LB1. That's what they're known in anthropology. So the scientists believe that LB1 was the result of a disease. Fossil evidence supports the theory because there were more advanced hominids at the time. Well, now we even see that this is going to be changed. And what was the real problem, the conundrum, was the fact that they found in the wrist, look at your wrist bone, right? Even now there is an evolution taking place. Do you have 3 lines or 2 lines? Now, in this case, when we're talking about LB1, the Hobbits, ours is like a boot. Again, find if you have 2 or 3. But in LB1, it's a pyramid. So it presents a real challenge here. And even the information that is out there now is going to have to be redone. It's going to have to be updated. Because it seems to be a natural process in nature. Nature itself shows the same diversity gene. And maybe it is a gene. What we do know is that in LB1, the females were, again, in many cases, more dominant than the males. In fact, I think it's still that case today. Now, here is how it continues to evolve here. Now we have Homo heidelbergensis. Well, we'll just call him the Rhodesian man. Again, as we begin to piece the puzzle together, it asks the question, why? I mean, this is Cro-Magnon man. Looks like some people I know. Now, there's a theory now saying that Elvis man, and here is Neanderthal, and you can see how in past the male and the female, and it was just because of the environment. You know, it was fight or flight. Survival was imperative. Now, there is some who say that the Homo elvis, let's just call him that for simplicity's sakes, may very well be Bigfoot. But we know that through the record that this is what it's really becoming. And what makes it even more interesting, when you do the DNA analysis as you look in this, the variance on this is not even 0.5%. It's less. So, are we in the midst of this continued, I don't know if you want to call it migration, evolution? And here's the difference. Now, obviously, we can contribute a lot of this to the fact that there's more food. And with more food, you're going to have changes on the genetic structure. The genes are going to mutate because of the fact that they're not in there in a starvation mode. There is basically, and you're having more than enough. And as the record becomes more and more distinct, we have to begin to ask ourselves, how did this begin? And is it continuing? We have the skulls. In fact, we have more than that. And as the technology gets better, with satellite, deep radar penetration in Earth, and it's amazing what they've come up with, we're going to find more and more, as we are. And so, when we talk about the Hobbit as a species separate from humans, it begins to beg is the question, how, why? There's no doubt that this is what the fossil record is showing. And it's not manufactured anymore. We can actually get we can take and do the MRIs. We can do the analysis on the cranial cavities. We can have the technology that will fill in what the brain was like, how it functioned. We now know by bones, by teeth. Teeth are the best records that we can see that this was very much a part of us, or we are part of them. And when you look at their size and the cranial cavity and where their brains were for the size, highly intelligent. In fact, I think they were probably even could be more intelligent than us today, because we don't live in an environment, again, where it's fight or flight. And it's a whole different environment when those senses are sharpened. You know, they say that the necessity is the mother of all innovation. Well, these people had to be innovative all the time. And so we're thinking now, as we begin to see how the migration took place, we can begin to see our hobbits as they begin to move. So we know they were here. We know their culture. And this is what they did. Look at this. This is the influence onto the rest of the world. In fact, your family tree is here. And look at here today. So, Now, I want to close it out on this. So the Ebu Gogo is a legend there that they gave sacrifices to these things, gifts to keep them out. There's some thought in theory that these may be direct descendants. Who knows? I think that they're still here. And then what does that imply for the rest of us? Wrap your head around that one. All right, folks, we'll talk soon.